The Mindfulness in Schools project was created when some teaching colleagues and I shared an ambition to bring together two things that were really close to our hearts. One was mindfulness practice, which we've been doing for many years, and the other was the art of classroom teaching, which as a teacher I can tell you none of us would ever claim to have mastered, but which is a real craft. And we ended up writing a 9-week classroom introduction to mindfulness, which we called .B, for reasons which I will explain later. And .B was, in essence, the answer to a very simple question. When 25 teenagers come tumbling into your classroom at 11:45 on some wet Tuesday morning, how are you going to persuade them that they want to learn mindfulness? They've never heard of it. It doesn't sound that thrilling. And if you told them that it involved sitting still and sitting quietly, they would run a mile. They are not going to come into the class and look at you all bright-eyed and expectant, saying, "Please, sir, teach us mindfulness, for we know it will make us happy and we shall flourish." No, it just doesn't work like that. How are you going to convince them that mindfulness is a life skill which is really worth learning, that can make a tremendous difference to their lives? You know that it can, but they don't know that. And .B was really our answer to the challenge we set ourselves, which was to write a mindfulness course which was engaging, fun, memorable, and also of practical use on the roller coaster that is adolescence. The other thing that struck us was, why is it in schools? A few people have touched on this today. Do we teach English, maths, geography, chemistry, biology, physics, languages, but we never, or very, very rarely, teach young people to use the lens, to best use the lens through which all of their experience, both at home and at school, is being filtered. And that is the faculty of their attention. Some of you, I imagine, will know a lot about mindfulness already. Some might not know very much. But what we always see in pretty much any definition of mindfulness is the word attention. And what a lot of research is telling us at the moment, and what I know from my own experience and from the kids that I taught, is that our mental health and happiness are profoundly shaped by what we do with our attention. What do I mean by attention? What I mean is that faculty of awareness that you can probably sense as you sit here right now. How is your attention? Is it zoomed in on me? That would be nice. I'd hope there was some of it zoomed in on me. Or is there a bit of hunger in the background? Is the mind wandering around a bit? If we're quiet just for a few moments, notice how our attention opens up to the soundscape around us. Your experience of this moment, like the experience of every moment of your life, is profoundly shaped by where you place your attention and how you place your attention. Now, being a school teacher, I cannot give a talk without involving my class. So are you ready to do a little mindfulness exercise? Yes! Good. And if you are at home, please do this. Otherwise, I will look very strange. Please join in this exercise for it to make sense. This is one of the first exercises we do on the course. What I'm going to do is I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1. And then I'm going to count up, and we're all going to count up, clapping, 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to hold out our hands about that far apart as if we're holding a football. Okay, so I'll go 3, 2, 1. We all go 1, 2, 3. And then we hold out our hands as if we're holding a football. Why don't we just sit up to give this some attitude as well? Classic feet shoulder width apart on the floor. Okay? Clap as hard as you can. 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Now, without looking at them, and even closing your eyes if you if you're happy to do that, try placing your attention in your hands. Now, what do you notice there? Fizzing, tingling, pins and needlesy, hot, cold. Now, let's play with our attention. Try zooming your attention in on your thumbs. And then letting go of the attention in your thumbs. Try zooming your attention in now on your little fingers. And if you're happy with that, why not try the tippy tip of your left little finger? And then just quietly, silently resting your hands in your lap and bringing your attention to something you do about 20,000 times a day, but very rarely notice, and that's your breathing. Just feeling the air coming in through your nostrils. Directing your attention to the touch of the air as it comes in and as your abdomen expands. Just being with your breathing for a few moments. Okay, thank you. What a good class. Now, I'm going to try and illustrate what the point of that exercise was with a little diagram, which is known in the trade as the 2 slices of cheese diagram. Here's the first slice of cheese. This is where we spend a great deal of our time. Our attention is absorbed in our thinking, and it tends to be absorbed in planning, remembering, analyzing, evaluating. What I'm talking about here is that little voice inside your head, that little monkey that yabbers away at you all the time, that internal narrative, that tape that's playing. Who knows what it's saying? Have I called the dentist? Pizza. I can't believe I said that to my boss. He's going to think I'm useless. Did I lock the car door? Now, for very good reasons, our attention tends to go to what's wrong, to what's threatening, to what's worrying, to what's lacking. And there's a very good survival reason for this. Our ancestors faced a lot of threats and dangers. They had to be alert. If I went down this path and came across a saber-toothed tiger, it was worth me remembering that and planning next time to go down that path. And that piece of evolutionary software is still very much part of the way we think. We scan, our attention scans our experience for problems. And when it finds one, it latches onto it. Somebody once said that the mind is like Teflon for good experiences, non-stick, they slide off. But it's like Velcro for bad ones. When something happens, it snags our attention. It might be one unkind word. It might be a text that you send and you don't get a reply to. It might be as easy as walking down the street and somebody you know not looking at you as you walk past. Bang, your mind kicks off into that whole mode of trying to work out what's been going on. Now, there is another mode of mind, and that is what we were doing in the exercise we just did. We were in our sensing mode. Our attention was directed to the present moment reality of our physical bodily sensations. Now, a lot of the time, our attention is allocated like this, mostly thinking, not much sensing. And one could say of us what James Joyce says of Mr. Duffy in Dubliners. He lived at a little distance from his body. We have a body, we're aware of it, but we don't really inhabit it. We inhabit our heads, and they chatter away at us all the time. And the sensing is just kind of going on autopilot in the background. Now, what a lot of research is telling us now, and what is also, once you practice this, just common sense, is how profoundly beneficial it is to spend even a relatively small amount of time every day with your attention allocated in this way, into the sensing mode. As we were doing then, as we can do now, just breathing, being aware of our body as it breathes, being aware of our feet on the floor. And by doing this, our minds are not spinning off into their stories and their interpretations about what they think is happening. No, our minds are here in the present moment, experiencing what is actually happening. And what is actually happening is that we are alive. And it can be wonderful in all sorts of situations. Now, we have to train this. So when the mind wanders, we bring it back. If it wanders 100 times, we bring it back. But what we're doing is we are training the muscle of our attention. And that is the foundation of mindfulness. And it's not just good for the mind. I was so relieved when I read a piece of research about 5 years ago that said that mindfulness practice improved immune function. I had noticed after I started practicing mindfulness that I was getting fewer colds. I never told anybody, nobody, because they thought I was a bit weird anyway, kind of sitting on the floor the way I did. And I thought, well, if they thought that sitting on the floor was somehow stopping colds, how can sitting on the floor every day stop me from getting colds? And what this research said was it's quite straightforward. You're less stressed. There's less cortisol. Cortisol is a suppressor of the immune system. Hey presto. So that's just one of the benefits. I mean, the other one which, in terms of young people, just one thing here. What I'm not doing, by the way, I'm not a teacher here telling that we should tell our young people not to think. Okay, that's not what I'm saying at all. Mindfulness is about recognizing when thinking becomes overthinking and rumination. Yeah, and knowing how to change gear into a mode of mind which is more nourishing. Okay, because if you don't change mind, if you don't, what can happen is anxiety and even depression. And one of the most telling signs of the traction that mindfulness is getting in the adult world is this, that NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, is now recommending mindfulness as a treatment for depression. You can go to the GP with a recurrent depression and be prescribed an 8-week mindfulness course, which is wonderful. But isn't it therefore a total no-brainer that with the spiraling depression in young people, that this should be being taught in our schools? A couple of examples. At a more serious level, one girl came up to me and said how helpful it had been to know how to bring her attention to her breathing and her feet when her mother was screaming at her. Because normally she would lose control and just get incredibly upset. But she found that refuge in the present moment, and that was a tremendous relief for her. At a more trivial level, but in some ways not so trivial, is exams are so much a part of school life now. They cause tremendous anxiety, but countless times I've had kids come up to me a year, 2 years, even 3 years later and said, "Oh, sir, I was standing outside the exam hall and I was bricking it," which for those of you who don't live in the UK means I was very, very nervous. And I did a .B, or I did a 7-11, which is 2 of the exercises we teach, and it really helped. But the other interesting thing is that mindfulness in the adult world now is not just about getting out of a bad space. It's also about getting into a good space. And actually in the all sorts of circumstances and applications that mindfulness is coming up, and one of those is in business. We've got Google, Apple, IBM, PwC, KPMG, General Mills. Somebody told me that eBay now have a mindfulness room in their headquarters. So in other words, these people are seeing the potential of a life skill which is not only making their employees healthier and happier and, interestingly, kinder to themselves and to their colleagues, but it's also helping them to work better. Now, again, in schools, what we're finding is the places kids are using this is in things like drama, to stay centered, in music, not to be overcome with the nerves when they're playing, in sport, when they're making the big kick. And that's one thing, another reason why mindfulness can bring so much to a school community. Now, the question now is, why did we call it .B? Well, what we did in lesson 4 was to get each of the kids to .B each other on their mobiles, which means just texting .B once a day for a week. And when you get your .B, it is just a signal. That dot says stop. Just pause. Come out of that relentless stream of your own internal narrative and notice that you are alive. Notice that you are breathing, that you are right here, right now. And that is what the B is. It's breathe, but it's also be, just exist. And, examples of how that comes to life in an adult context in a kid's life or an adolescent's life is a 16-year-old. This is one of the earliest .B stories. If I had more time, I could tell you countless .B stories. There's bizarre situations that people get .B'd. But one of the earlier ones, yes, one of the early... It's not the time or the place. One of the earliest .B stories was of a young man who came out of a nightclub, and the girl that he was with just collapsed on the floor in front of him. Probably, vodka, something, just was on the floor. He felt really panicky and really stressed and really worried, and suddenly, ping, .B. Okay, this is here. Breathe. Feel your feet on the floor. And he said it just really helped him just to see the situation clearly. Recovery position, 999, job done. Now, okay. Now, I'd like to finish with this quote from William James, very prescient, that in 1890 he was able to spot this. The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. An education which should improve this faculty would be the education par excellence. But it is easier to define this ideal than to give practical instructions for bringing it about. Well, now we do have those practical instructions for bringing it out. They are tried and tested. And the research evidence is telling us time and again that it is not only good for their mental health and their happiness, but for them to be themselves at their very best. The problem, of course, is that in the vast majority of schools, these skills are just not available. And wouldn't it be wonderful if they were? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach young people to train their attention in the same way we teach them to read and we teach them to write? What a difference that would make to every moment of their experience. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is really the ambition of the Mindfulness in Schools project. Thank you.